All right, let's talk about a real giant of English literature, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Now, this is a story that has absolutely captivated readers for centuries, but today we're going to look at it through a totally different lens, not just as a classic romance, but as a story of a deep betrayal and a classic completely reimagined.
You really can't talk about Jane Eyre without starting right here. This is, without a doubt, one of the most famous lines in all of fiction. Reader, I married him. For over 170 years, that one little sentence has pretty much cemented the novel's reputation as one of the greatest love stories ever told. End of story, right?
Well, not so fast. What if that famous ending isn't the whole picture? What if that romance is actually covering up something way, way darker? For a lot of modern readers, when they really dig into it, the true heart of Jane Eyre isn't a love story at all. It's a profound and, frankly, painful betrayal.
But before we can get into the betrayal, we have to understand why this book was such a big deal in the first place. I mean, we need to appreciate just how revolutionary it was. So, let's jump back to 1847 and see what made Jane Eyre an absolute classic from the moment it was published. Okay, so at its core, Jane Eyre is what's called a Bildungsroman, which is a bit of a mouthful, I know. All it really means is that it's a coming-of-age story. It's a novel that follows one person's moral, psychological, and spiritual growth from childhood all the way to adulthood. And this was honestly a game-changer. It was one of the very first times readers got this incredibly intimate, first-person look into the inner life of a female hero.
And wow, what a journey it is. Jane's life unfolds in these 5 really distinct stages. We first meet her as this abused, unloved orphan at Gateshead Hall. From there, she's sent to the brutal Lowood institution, where she gets an education but also experiences terrible loss. Then comes Thornfield Hall, where she works as a governess and falls head over heels for the brooding Mr. Rochester. After a devastating secret sends her fleeing, she finds true independence and family at Moor House. And finally, there's Ferndean Manor, for the reunion and that famous marriage. It's a whole, rich, complicated life packed into one book.
But what makes this story so timeless is how Brontë weaves all these incredible themes into Jane's journey. I mean, yeah, it's about the search for love and belonging, but it's also about this fierce, desperate struggle for female autonomy in a world that wants to keep women in a box. It digs into huge questions about religion and morality. It criticizes the rigid class system. But above all, it's a celebration of the power of the individual spirit. That was truly radical stuff for the time.
Jane isn't just a hero on her own, though. The people she meets are just as important. They challenge her at every turn, and in doing so, force her and us, the readers, to grapple with some really deep moral questions.
So you've got the 2 men who want to marry her, and they couldn't be more different. They represent 2 completely different futures for Jane. On one side, you have Edward Rochester. He's passionate, intense, brooding, a total Byronic hero. He offers her a life of epic love and sees her as his equal, his soulmate. And on the other side, you've got St. John Rivers. He's cold, religious, dutiful. He offers her a life of purpose, but he doesn't want a partner. He wants an assistant. And oh man, this quote just says it all. St. John's proposal has to be one of the most chilling in all of literature. He literally tells her, "You are formed for labor, not for love. You shall be mine. I claim you, not for my pleasure, but for my sovereign service." Can you believe that? He doesn't see her, he sees a tool to be used. For Jane, who values her freedom and her soul more than anything, this is an absolute nightmare. But you know, the biggest threat to Jane's happiness, the thing that completely shatters her romance with Rochester, it's not another man. It's a secret, a terrible secret, locked away in the attic. Yep. Hiding in the shadows of this grand Gothic mansion is Rochester's biggest secret, his first wife, Bertha Mason. He married her years ago in the West Indies, and he claims she went mad. So, what did he do? He locked her away in the attic of Thornfield Hall. A ghost in her own home, hidden from the world, and most importantly, hidden from Jane.
In literary circles, there's this fantastic concept for her. They call Bertha Jane's Gothic double. Think of her as the physical manifestation of everything Jane, as a proper Victorian woman, has to repress. Where Jane is controlled and rational, Bertha is described as savage and animalistic. She is Jane's rage, her passion, her rebellion, all let loose. And, this is really important, she's presented as this symbol of colonial otherness versus Jane's very English sense of reason.
And that brings us to this powerful, modern way of reading the novel.
Because what happens when you stop seeing Bertha as just a creepy plot device? What happens when you start to see her as a real person, as a victim? This is where that feeling of betrayal really starts to burn.
So, get this. A writer and divinity scholar named Vanessa Zoltan decided to read Jane Eyre as if it were a sacred text, studying it intensely for over a year. She adored the book, but the deeper she got, the more she felt this incredible sense of being betrayed by it, and it led her to this absolutely startling conclusion. This novel is partially a racist argument for global imperialism, slavery, and patriarchy.
Wow. For Zoltan, it was an emotional gut punch. This story she had loved and admired suddenly felt like it was lying to her. She came to see that the happy ending, "Reader, I married him," is only possible because a woman of color is sacrificed, violently killed off, so that the white hero and heroine can finally be together. From this perspective, the whole story starts to look like a justification for a really ugly and unjust system.
Now, this reading has sparked a huge and really fascinating debate, and it's important to look at both sides here. So on one hand, the critical reading says Bertha is a woman of color, and that Rochester's disgust for her is based on pure racial prejudice, making the novel a fundamentally racist text. But historical context complicates things a bit. On the other hand, many scholars point out that the term Creole in the 19th century didn't always mean a person of color. It often just meant someone of European descent who was born in the colonies. And in the book itself, Rochester explicitly says his horror comes from discovering a history of hereditary madness in her family, which they hid from him. This view doesn't let the book off the hook for its colonial mindset, but it does shift the focus of Rochester's prejudice. It gets complicated. So, what do you do? What do you do when a story you absolutely love turns out to be deeply flawed? When a classic text feels like it has betrayed you? Do you just throw it in the trash? Well, for Vanessa Zoltan, the answer was a definite no.
Her journey didn't just stop with that awful feeling of betrayal. Instead of walking away from Jane Eyre forever, she actually found a way to re-engage with it, to come back to the story on new, more honest terms.
And she actually lays out this really powerful 4-step process for how to do it. Step 1, you have to feel the betrayal. You have to sit with it and acknowledge the problematic parts of the text. Step 2, reject cynicism. Don't just give up and throw the whole thing out. Step 3, return to the source. Go back and reread it, but this time with your eyes wide open. And finally, step 4, find a new meaning. And you do that by reclaiming the story, often by shifting your focus to the characters who are pushed to the sidelines.
And this is where her journey ends up, in this really beautiful place. She says, "Without the betrayal, I never would have seen the beauty of the mad woman in the attic." How amazing is that? By facing the novel's biggest flaw head-on, she found a new hero. The story stopped being about Jane's quiet perseverance and started being about Bertha's fiery rebellion, the woman who literally burns down the house that was her prison.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question, one that I think we can apply to so many of the stories that we cherish. Every great book, every great movie has its shadows, its uncomfortable corners, its characters locked in the attic. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What mad woman in the attic is hiding in your favorite story?